Guys, welcome back to G-Tech Motorworks. Today we've got another common problems video on BMW 530D. Let's go. So we're going to start by speaking about the engine. One of the common faults on the 530D, this is the N57D30A edition. So it's the twin power turbo engine. One of the common faults on this, guys, as most BMWs and most cars these days, rocker cover gaskets. We see quite a few of these at G-Tech Motorworks. They do fail. They are only rubber, so they get hot and they sort of perish and they leak. So if that happens, get it checked out by a specialist or take it to a garage near you. Another issue I want to speak about today, guys, on the engine is the coolant temperature sensors. Now on these, we have seen a few times the coolant temperature sensors short out. Now what that does in turn, it basically makes the car think it's in the middle of suburbia in minus 50 degrees. So what you start getting is the ECU starts pumping more fuel into the engine, it all runs rough, and then in turn it actually has an adverse effect on your DPF as well, which we'll come on to in a minute. So coolant temperature sensors. The other run-of-the-mill stuff on these guys is the EGR cooler. They leak internally. Common telltale signs: the car will run rough, it'll start to leak coolant, but you won't physically be able to see it. You'll get a coolant light on. Obviously, carrying out some tests, you'll be able to find out the EGR cooler is failed internally and it leaks. Another common issue on the 530D, guys, is the swirl flaps. Now you might have heard this up and down the internet and on another few videos. I have mentioned it on a few of the other common problem BMW videos. The swirl flaps basically control the swirl going into the engine. They're based in the inlet manifold. Now when they break, because of the design, they go into the engine and cause catastrophic damage. Way to check that is obviously remove the inlet manifold and see if they've either been blanked off. If they haven't, get them blanked off, because if they break, it's pricey. Another one is glow plugs. Glow plugs are quite a common fault, not just on the 530D, but most of the diesel engines these days. They do fail after a time. They are a serviceable item. Now when they do fail, they short out usually and cause a problem with the glow plug control module, which is basically a little relay which sends out the voltages to the different cylinders. So we recommend, if that happens, you replace all 6 glow plugs on the car and you replace the glow plug module. Another one we've quite commonly seen on the 530D and the 520Ds is the crank pulley. Now, because of the sheer torque on these engines, the rubber dampening inside the crank pulley, it's actually called a dampening pulley, it actually turns, and because it keeps having too much torque put through it, they break. And when they fall off, they pull off the auxiliary belt with them. So that's quite a common fault on these. Another one we've seen, guys, is obviously DPFs. Now that's quite a common fault on most diesels these days. If you're pottering around going to Asda here, there, doing 5-6 miles a day, believe me, your DPF will get clogged soon. It needs to be doing at least 100-150 miles a week, especially long run, so that the temperature can get hot in the exhaust and the soot can be burnt out, and the DPF can basically clear itself out. Now another big one we've seen quite recently, we've had quite a few of these come through the workshop door. Fuel pump pulleys and the fuel pumps themselves. What happens is the bearings internally, they collapse and they cause massive damage to the whole fueling system. Now when the fuel pump breaks up inside, it lets little shards of metal, because obviously the bearings collapse inside, it lets little shards of metal out through the fueling system, and what that does is shorts your injectors out. It can damage your fuel rail pressure sensor and your regulator valve. Also, obviously, the fuel pump is damaged because of the bearing, but then it's catastrophic. It can be catastrophic damage to the injector. So we've had a few where we've had to replace them because the shards are that small. Once they're inside these piezo injectors, you're not getting them back out. We've even had to replace the lift pumps, which are under the back seat, the pre-supply pump, and obviously clear out the line. So that is a big one. Now they do just fail out of nowhere. So that's that. Onto that as well, we've seen a few of these with timing chains, not as much as the older model, because they have changed the tensioner design on these, but the N57 is still prone for timing chains. Next, we are on to the mechanical common faults of the 530D BMW. So we'll begin with gearbox oil changes. Now you're probably thinking, why is he saying gearbox oil changes? So BMW specified that the gearboxes on these cars, and most BMWs, are sealed for life. But guess what? When they're leaking, they're not sealed for life, are they? So stay on top of it, get your gearbox oil changes done with the sump and the new gasket. We've seen quite a few of these. They're not sealed for life, trust me. Second thing, diff seals. We see quite a few diff seals that fail all the time on these BMWs, especially the 530D. So, you know, the leak, if you let it go on too long, the diff can actually fail, so get that replaced if you have that problem. Moving on, another biggie we see with these, the 530Ds and the X5s and stuff, rear airbag suspension. Very, very big problem with these, because after a certain amount of time, they literally just fail. They get a crease in the airbag material, in the rubber, and psh, down your car will go. Another thing that can fail with the rear suspension is also the air pump. We've had a few of these where they fail, literally. So you'll come to the car one day, it'll be sat on the floor, so you'll be like, why does my car look dropped like a 1970s Cadillac? The problem is the airbags have leaked and now your pump doesn't work. Very common issue with these. Another one we've seen on these 530Ds is play in the track rod ends and the steering. Quite a common thing on these, and just lately, with the weather being like this as well, we've done a few of them where they've had play on the inside drums as well, on the drumsticks. So yeah, quite a common fault on them. Other stuff, mechanically, just maintenance stuff, struts, springs, things like that. The struts do, because they're quite a heavy car, it's basically a squashed down X5. Because they're quite a heavy car, the struts do tend to leak after a certain amount of time, so just keep an eye on them as well. We are now moving on to electrical issues. A massive one we've seen, guys, with the 530Ds, especially the earlier ones, is the alternator failing. Now you're going to think, why is he saying that? How does it fail? I'll explain. So we've had a few customers complain where they'll be driving along and their revs will just go flying up and all the lights will come on to the dash like a Christmas tree, right? Now you think, well, what's that got to do with the alternator? I'll explain. The alternator is designed to keep the power of the whole vehicle up to a certain charge. So once the vehicle is running, it runs between 13.6 and 14.4 volts. That makes sure that there's enough substantial power going around the car so the engine can run and all the components, windows, heaters, blowers, everything like that can work, lights can continue. Now the alternators have like a regulator pack on the back of them. Unfortunately on these, they fail sometimes. And what happens is that causes a sudden surge in power. So rather than staying at a stable voltage between 13.6 and 14.4, they actually surge to 15.5, and I have seen them surging up to 17 volts. Dangerous for the control modules, because we've seen a few where they have popped control modules. 12 volt car, guys, you know, these ECUs are not meant to be running at 17, 18 point volts. So just keep an eye on them. If that does happen, get it checked out. It's very easy to diagnose. You can just do a test on the battery and see what your alternator is outputting. Another one on the 530D, guys, electric handbrake. Now, there's no end of issues we see with these at G-Tech as a specialist. Sometimes the electric calipers stick on. Sometimes the unit in the back, that just fails. So electric handbrake is quite a common one. Keep an eye on them. The worst situation you can be in is you come to it and it won't release. So you have to do a procedure to get the rear wheels released. So that's a common fault with the 530D. Another electrical issue we've got is the iDrives. Beautiful iDrive, you're trying to press it and guess what? It don't work. Either switches off or it glitches. Quite a common fault, especially with the older ones. The new ID7 ones and ID9s, they're actually better. Processors quicker in them, but the older ones, they can glitch and fail, so keep an eye on them. Now guys, on the older 5 Series, there was a nice little SOS button. God forbid, if you ever got into any issues, you broke down, you had an accident, or you needed an emergency assistance, you'd press that button and a nice little lady on the other end would be like, hello, how can I help you? But guess what? With the newer BMs, the SOS battery is separate. Why would you do that? It's like the shittest design in the world. But I don't know why BMW have done that. They've put it as a serviceable item. Every 2 years they recommend you replace the battery. Now we get loads of customers kicking off saying, oh, all the lights are on, it says SOS failure. What's happened? Relax, it's just a battery. They're about £70 and we can fit them for you. But you should nag at BMW for making it separate. Click the link below and you can follow us on our G-Tech Motorworks Facebook page or Instagram, message us. If you need information on your SOS sign which comes up on your BMW, we can fix that for you, no problem. So there you have it, guys. That was the BMW 530D, lovely car. Now please stop sending me messages saying, why are you killing the cars? Why are you doing this? Why? We're just trying to tell you, right, that not all BMWs are shit. We're not trying to tell you that. What we're trying to say to you is that the models we see as a BMW, Volkswagen Audi Group specialist, we're just highlighting some faults that we see so you can keep an eye on them if you're looking at buying one, if you've got one, or if you just want education, you know. Teach us, send us a message. You know, we're always learning. Just because we're a specialist, it doesn't mean that we know something you don't know. So it's literally just the faults we have seen on these vehicles as a specialist in the 10-15 years we've been doing the job. So that's why we're making these videos, so they're educational for you. We want to help you. So guys, Derby's BMW Volkswagen Audi Group specialist, please like, share and subscribe. Stay tuned, we're growing daily. Hope you're liking the content. Comment below. See you next time.